Friends, we'll talk now about economic diplomacy again, the second pillar of diplomatic work. This is my second conversation on that same subject. This time I want to talk mainly about two major activities, trade and investment. And my third point will cover some other residual areas which also pertain to economic diplomacy. So first, let's look at trade. Trade is really at the heart of a country's external connections. Imports bring in the vital equipment, machinery, and other inputs into the economic and social development process. Exports are even more crucial. Well, they are both equally important in a way, but we tend to give special weight to exports because first, they give jobs at home to the industries that make the export products, and second, they bring inflows of foreign exchange which permit the country to finance its imports and in addition also build up reserves for the country for a rainy day. Now, export promotion is both an activity carried out in the home country, but it also is executed in the embassy. So, who is responsible for exports? All the economic ministries at home, starting with the foreign ministry, and also the network of embassies. Some countries have had special agencies which have offices in major economic partner countries. That's a good thing. But one can't afford to have more than a few, 10, 15 such offices. So it is the embassies which are the essential arms and legs of the national system. I have said it before and it's worth repeating that embassies are managed by the foreign ministry, but they belong to the entire country. They serve the entire nation, not just the official system, but also the non-state stakeholders in the country, the businesses, the industrial entities, academia, etc., etc. We've talked about it before. So what do they do? How do they promote exports? A very simple way is you look at the import basket of the country where you are located. And say you find that the imports of ready-made garments are 18% of that country's total imports. Then you look at your country's share in that basket of ready-made garments. If that share is below your typical share in a neighboring country or in the world as a whole, then clearly you are underselling in that country. Something is missing. For example, for India, France has long been a country where India's total share in the import basket of that country is significantly lower than India's share in the import basket of Germany. So, clearly, there is something that we need to do more in France in order to push our exports. There is another way of looking at it. Focus on new products. If you can open the door, even with a small order, say for watches made in your home country, and mind you, your home country is typically not a major watch manufacturer. if you can put your foot in the door in one country, even with a small shipment, that shipment will then lead to other export activities. And there is something called a lemming effect. Once one particular exporter enters a new market, other businesses will jump in because they also want to make profits. The other thing is to reach out to a new country, a country where your exports are very small. It could be an African country where your pharmaceutical exports are tiny, maybe $2, $3, $10 million per year. Pharmaceuticals are a substance that every country requires. Even the richest country in the world import some of the pharmaceuticals that they use. So there is an opportunity. And again, once you open a new country to your country's exports, then home exporters will again flock in and they will produce growth. I remember a lovely story of an Indian embassy in Mexico where an enterprising young counselor produced his own market report. He did his research. He had no training whatsoever, but he taught himself. He read, he learned from others. He went around. He went to exhibitions of shoes, leather exhibitions, and he became an expert. He produced an authoritative, an impressive report on Mexico's leather industry from the perspective of a new exporter. And thanks to that young man's personal initiative, a major new market was opened by India. Every country has these fine success stories, these case histories. They need to be put together. Okay. There is another approach that some countries use, and I'll give you the example of Canada. Canada designates 2 countries, or maybe 3 per year, as special target countries for economic promotion. I think they do this on a 2-year cycle. So every year, 1 or 2 countries drop out and 1 or 2 countries are added. And it's a 2-year term for that country. During that period, Canada organizes a number of activities at home. Buyer-seller meetings, special exhibitions, discussions, talks about investment opportunities, in which people from that country are also invited to join. And this is a wonderful method of focusing on a particular country. My second point is about investments. Remember, I mentioned earlier that foreign direct investment is the best kind of foreign investment because it is sticky. Once an investor comes in, the investor will stay. Even if that investor wants to go out after 5 years or 10 years, it will take time and some effort, maybe a year, maybe 2 years to fully disengage. The other kind of investment, which is also useful to the country, is what are called M&A activities, mergers and acquisitions. These are takeovers of existing companies which then are bought up, 20%, 40% share, sometimes majority shareholding by a foreign partner. Again, that is investment in real stock, real productive facilities. Again, not easy to disengage. Then you have other kinds of foreign investments. You have wealth funds. Many countries that have vast reserves, whether it is Norway, the United Arab Emirates, Singapore, China, Japan, they invest in foreign countries through their wealth funds. Norway, hard to believe, little country of 5 million people, has nearly $2 trillion in these wealth funds because they have huge reserves of hydrocarbons, oil and gas, and they've collected the money, not frittered it away, and they use that money to make important investments around the world. The United Arab Emirates decided some years ago, 2 or 3 perhaps, that they would invest at least a largish sum of money in India. The amount was not officially announced, but we know it was a large sum of money. And they are quietly going ahead with these investments. Then you have pension funds, you have insurance funds, you have private investors who also bring in money for investment. And you remember I mentioned earlier, there are also what are called portfolio investments. That is money that comes into your stock market. But the problem with that is it's money that comes quickly and goes out quickly. So it is very liquid, often to the disadvantage of the receiving country. My third and final point refers to other economic actions. Tourism. Do you know how important tourism is for a country like Thailand? Some 20% of its GDP comes from tourism. The country gets somewhere in the neighborhood of 55 million tourists per year. Yes, thanks to the virus pandemic that we are all witnessing today, that we are all suffering today, that tourism industry is in a total tailspin. Hotels, airlines, to travel agents, they are all faced with major problems. But the human race will endure. This too shall pass, and a day will come when we will have moved beyond the virus epidemic, and the tourism industry, travel, will again begin to pick up. It will take time, but it will get there, I am confident. Let me then turn to technology. Again, a critical area for countries because they need technology in order to push their economic growth forward, in order to provide their people with the facilities, the services that they require. And technology investments is a big area for discussion. Foreign aid, I referred to it earlier. Foreign aid is also an important source of earnings for countries. There is one kind of inflows of money I haven't mentioned so far, and that is remittances. Private remittances by individuals who live in foreign countries and who send money back home. Around the world, around $600 billion come into countries as these kind of remittances. India is lucky that it is the world's highest remittance receiving country. The current inflow is in the neighborhood of $75 billion per year. If it was not for this inflow, the Indian economy, the balance of payments of the country would not be as comfortable as it has been. So, those countries that have their citizens working abroad, diasporas we call them, they are the recipients of these kind of inflows. Some countries have a special machinery for trade and investment promotion. I mentioned it before. Let me give the example of Mexico. Mexico had a fine agency that was called Pro Mexico. It was wound up in 2018 by the government in power. And there was a sense of consternation among many people, how would Mexico manage without the help of this agency? Well, now the work is being done by Mexico's embassies, and I have an impression that they are fast learners, that I don't think Mexico's promotion of trade and investments has suffered very much. But this is something that needs to be checked because it's only a year and a half or 2 years since the changes were carried out. Around the same time, I think it was in 2017, Britain carried out an experiment. It established a new Department of International Trade, and it has since then set up a separate parallel system of trade representatives abroad with 9 senior personalities located at 9 strategic regions or countries, and they are all answerable to the new department and not to the Foreign Office as earlier, where the Foreign Office and the economic entity ran something called Trade and Invest UK. It seemed to be working quite well, but anyway, a government in power changed the system. I don't know how well it is working. I fear that it may create a parallel system that kind of brushes against a little bit the diplomatic missions. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it will work very well. I think the jury is still out. So this is more or less what I wanted to talk about in this episode. I hope it's of interest. And in the next episode, we'll shift gears and go to another subject altogether. Thank you very much.